Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another creator interview. I'm joined again by Ant. How are you doing, Ant?
Hi guys, you're right.
And our guest today is the wonderful Lianne Tokey. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome, and we look forward to learning about your story. But I have to say, before we get started, your background is amazing. Is that something that you've created?
Actually, it is. Yes, it's a chalkboard wall that I try to change up every once in a while, and this is the current version of it. It's chalk illustration, and it speaks to my background. So yeah, I like to kind of have some sort of activity behind me when I'm doing these calls. Yeah.
Amazing. I think we have a winner for the best background, Ant, from out of all the
Yeah,
interviews.
better than some of the guys we've had.
Better than a bit of laundry in the background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So Lianne, would love to start by kind of asking a bit more about your career and kind of some of the highlights to date.
Sure. I mean, I think, my career has spanned 2 decades now. And over that time, what I've noticed is there's always been a consistent theme when it comes to the work that I'm producing. So I think, like any other artist, the goal is always to create something that is inspiring, that's captivating to the user, that's experiencing it, and something that's going to kind of shift how they're looking at the world. So that's been my theme through all the work that I've done. The only difference has been the tools that I've been using. So I started in university doing very traditional art and fine art. So sculpture, illustration, painting. And I loved those experiences because they were tactile. It was something that I could really become a part of. But what I found limiting was that it was really just the person that was in the space that had to experience it. So it was kind of very confining and linear. So when I discovered Photoshop and I realized I could actually digitize the work that I was doing, and not only digitize it, but send it to different parts of the world and different locations, I wasn't just kind of forced to have that experience for the one person that was in the space. So it was lovely because I said, here's a whole new career path for me. I can take this digital work. And at the time, I was doing a lot of graphic design. So a lot of posters and flyers and magazine spreads. That was the kind of work I was doing. And the agency that I was working with at the time said to me, so do you think you could shift over to doing web design? And I was thinking, well, I don't know how to do web design, but they said, don't worry about it, we'll teach you. And so that was probably one of the more pivotal points of my career where I learned how to code. And I didn't do a ton of backend. I did learn how to communicate with the backend to make the work obviously speak to the servers, et cetera. But it was just another way of being able to add this whole new element of interactivity to my work. And that was very exciting for me because I realized it was not just a singular experience. Now there was interaction, and now the user was getting feedback from that interaction. I found that very captivating. So I stayed in that space for a really long time in web development. I ended up building up my own business, an e-com. So a whole learning curve there that was very exciting. And I think I kind of plateaued during that process. It was about 10 years, you're experiencing what you can in that space. And then suddenly I remember experiencing, excuse me, a filter. I think like so many people, we had it first on Snapchat, and I remember seeing the dog ears and the tongue, and I was kind of like, whoa, what is this? And, and there was that moment like, what's going on here? So I checked it out and I was like, okay, that's great and all, not something I can probably do because I assumed it was an agency type of thing that had a whole bunch of developers and a really exhaustive process to make that happen. And upon further investigation, I realized this is actually something I can do. And this light went off and I was so captivated. I'm like, okay, get my hands on whatever I could. I came across, obviously I downloaded Lens Studio and I got into that, but it was when I got into Spark, the Facebook AR Studio at the time. Facebook had their version of that. And I remember getting into it, and it was the ease of use that was really surprising to me. And not only that I could conceptualize so quickly and bring that to fruition. It was like a matter of hours. And I remember thinking, this is something, because I think if, like I'm like any other artist, you have all of these ideas. And if you get kind of stuck up in the process of trying to realize your vision, you kind of lose momentum sometimes, right? So for me, I found that there was all this momentum, and I was able to kind of figure out the things that I wanted to do, translate them to real-time immersive experiences. And I was just like, this is where I need to be. And so, fast forward 2 years and billions of impressions and stuff later on the Spark platform. And it's been a whirlwind, but not just that though, there's been a whole, community experience that's gone along with that, which is a bonus. It's been a total extra thing that I didn't expect to experience when I got into this journey. So that's where we are. Here we are.
Amazing. No, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I think it's interesting. You kind of mentioned, you had a pivotal moment with web development. I think, how much did that kind of give you a bit of an advantage when Lens Studio, came out, or Spark AR? I mean, was that a bit easier for you to kind of get involved?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think more from the side of, first of all, not being intimidated by the process, because with web dev, I mean, as sure as you know, it moves quickly, right? So as new updates are introduced or new features, etc., you have to be able to pivot quickly and shift and adapt what you've already built and integrate, right? And I think that's kind of the premise of this whole industry. It's not for everybody. I think people that are coming from traditional arts, like I did, that background, there's this huge intimidation factor that, this technology is moving quickly and you have to keep up. But I think once you've kind of seasoned yourself to expect the change that it's going to come and that you embrace it, and then be in that learning mindset, that you'll always be able to kind of stay on top of all the changes that are coming down the pipe. So, yeah.
Yeah. And can you remember what your first filter or effect was?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What
you
was
always
it?
remember the first, right? So for me, because it was speaking to, I thought to myself, I should do something that integrates what I was really practicing at the time with hand lettering. And so I wanted something that would be, kind of fun and playful, because that also speaks to the kind of work that I like to do. I have a very broad audience, and a lot of them are young. So it was it had a thought bubble, and it's actually still live, and different points of expression within the thought bubble. And it was just a little animated hand lettering that I did. And I remember submitting that for entry into the Spark AR beta program, which ended up having me accepted into that program. So yeah, that was my first official Instagram filter. I should say, back up 1 year though, the first time I had ever experienced it, it was a reindeer filter on Facebook that may
Nice.
still be live. I don't know. Hopefully not. But yeah, that was my first 2-hour stint. I was like, wow, I can make a reindeer and I can make my nose close. So
I've still got some Facebook effects live still on my hub, like that.
Do you?
Sometimes they just pop up, like, and I see them. Yeah, I don't know where they are though. I can't find them.
No.
On Facebook, but they're in there somewhere.
I know. And I think that was the hesitation in kind of moving forward with Facebook, because there's a whole year lag. I don't know if you recall that, but you could build and build for Facebook, but then,
Good
like
old AR Studio.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And looking at your work, I mean, you obviously using color in a beautiful way, and kind of the lettering and things. I mean, was it difficult to kind of replicate that in Spark AR Studio or Lens Studio?
Definitely not. Like, that was another thing that I found, when I'm saying that it was really easy to kind of get into building and creating. It was very natural to flow. And they really have a very low barrier to entry when it comes to importing your assets. And for me, I build everything in layers digitally anyway. So a lot of the work that I do has to do with taking apart the work that is existing already digitally. So it was a natural transition. It's quite intuitive. Once you kind of get the basics of it, I found both to be very intuitive. So it was an easy transition for me. I think coming from maybe more of a traditional, if you had to scan and work, I could see how that could be an extra step, but I think anyone that's working in traditional space should already be adopting, getting their work into a digital, method or something like that anyhow. So, it should be part of the process regardless. And it's, very easy.
And building upon that then, how, what was it, part of that process then to all of a sudden, you're creating kind of art on a flat surface, and then kind of build into your creativity, I need to think about how this is going to look from all angles, in a 3D environment. Was that a learning curve?
That was the part that was most exciting to me, actually, because you are so used to working on 2 dimensions that your brain is almost trained in a certain way in your creative process to think through the steps, and like I said, it was kind of a plateau, and it was kind of the same kind of method of creating that I'd done for so many years. And here now was this opportunity to think, okay, not only am I building for 3D space, but immersed 3D space. So it's not just that you're viewing it as a third person, the actual user becomes part of that experience. And so now it's adding a whole new layer to the creative process, which I found completely thrilling. And I don't know if it's the same for a lot of creators, but I would go to sleep at night and my brain was just churning because you're thinking of all these new exciting ways that you can present your information in your work, right? And it's still like that. I mean, like I said, we're just at the beginning of this. It's very, very exciting. Yeah.
It's literally bringing your kind of creative imagination to life, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you've mentioned Spark AR and a Lens Studio kind of when you first started out. I mean, do you split between both platforms or technologies, or do you focus more on Spark now, or what's your split?
No, I'm definitely, excuse me a sec, got a hair or something. Sorry.
No worries.
So for me, it is definitely Spark AR, and I just choose that platform because, I think, again, it's just what I prefer to do. I like to know the audience that I'm speaking to. And it's not to say that I don't know it on Lens. It's just I have more of an entrepreneurial spirit, and therefore I can see the pathway a bit more clearly to the end goal for me on Instagram. Not even Facebook right now, but definitely for Instagram. So it's more of my trajectory and kind of where I see myself going and my career path that I focus more on Instagram and Spark AR.
We had some interesting conversations this morning with Christian about VR, designing VR. You've done some of that, haven't you, with Tilt Brush? I'd love to know more about that. How do you feel about that whole thing? So
that, for me, I feel that AR is just a stepping stone right now. I think we're just sitting in the lobby with AR, and I think VR is the main show, to be honest. But that's, I mean, again, that's the progression of how tech advances. And I think for me, it's changed as well, the things that I'm learning, because VR is extremely exciting to me. That's full immersion. You have the opportunity to fully transport people without the necessity of kind of being limited by the screen, or even, I think when we get into the headsets and the full immersion, it creates a whole new conversation, even about what reality is, right? And how, as individuals, we're going to be creating and experiencing our own individual reality. Whereas I think previously it was always dictated to us. Okay, this is how you're going to experience things, and it's, only one way. But now there's this whole level of, I think, interaction that the user can really build their own reality. And I mean, there are so many opportunities for that. I think the only barrier right now is the capacity for people to adopt the technology to the wearable headsets or the spectacles or whatever it is. So that's kind of the stopping point right now. But once that's down, then yeah.
How do you find creating in VR, like when you're inside it? I mean, do you think it's something you're going to be looking to kind of pivot into full time, or do you think that's the next step, that we're going to go and we're going to be drawing everything inside?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I do now. It's interesting because I have learned, and actually we had talked about this separately, the Cinema 4D. You were a huge influence for me too, I think, when we were talking about it, because I knew that if you're to build in that space for 3D, you need to build in 3D, right? Mm-hmm. And my first experience, again, was kind of disconnected when I was sitting there. I'm thinking, here I am building 3D on a 2D platform where I need to be. I'm a creator. I'm a sculptor first and foremost. I've always considered myself to be a sculptor. So to get into the headset, and when I first got into Tilt Brush, was my first experience creating in VR. That to me was extremely natural and fluid and beautiful. And then going into Gravity Sketch, Christian uses that, and he was also really great and pointed me in that direction. The beautiful thing about that is that you can actually alter what you've created in the space. So now you have these two basic tools that are just like painting in space, but then also building and editing. And the next step for me is going to be getting into actual sculpting, because that goes back to my roots. So it's as though I'm sculpting without the mess, without the fuss, without, again, having it kind of limited to one version of it and not being able to tweak it and change it. So, I mean, I can't even, I am beyond excited about getting into sculpting and to building in VR, but that's, it's good because it keeps the momentum going. It keeps the enthusiasm for this, as a creator, you have a whole lot of stuff to work towards, and these are really exciting things to work towards. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Just looking, you have a fantastic website. You kind of promote yourself in a really great way, and you have, you're obviously doing commercial work and also personal effects. One of the questions, we find quite interesting is how do you manage your time to, keep, producing these amazing, wonderful kind of effects that, you kind of do to kind of showcase your latest creative skills, but then manage that whilst delivering on kind of commercial work?
That's the challenge for sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all wish we had more time. So obviously, there's a priority sequence for me. And this is just, again, 20 years of doing this on your own. I've been doing freelance for that amount of time. What works for me is designating certain blocks of time. So for example, creative work for me always happens in the evenings. That's just my zone of genius for that kind of thing. So if I'm conceptualizing, if I am playing around with new tech, it's going to be in the evening, whereas daytime work is designated for client work and even certain days I have allocated for admin, so that my focus remains kind of laser pointed at just whatever the task is at hand, and then I can move on to the next thing. And that there's a structure for it. And I think that's the biggest part, is making sure that there's some sort of structure to the chaos, because there's always something happening, and you have to have little points of flexibility as well. Just build in those things so that you can adapt to whatever happens. And like the big pivot this year was COVID. Obviously lots of things changed, and that was a huge shift, but you do it. This is the industry, right? We always have to be on our toes and ready to go with the flow. So
absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of your kind of creative process or the inspiration funnel, I mean, where does that come from? I mean, what's kind of that process for you?
I think the biggest thing for me for inspiration is always making sure that I'm not kind of going through with blinders on in life. I'm always open to whatever I might be experiencing in the moment. So something as simple as going for a walk in nature. I'm not just, trudging along. I'm aware, and I'm looking for new ways to experience kind of the banal, the same thing I've experienced over and over again, and look at it through different ways. Is the way that light is hitting that particular day, or what season it is, or the interaction of whatever wildlife, whatever the experience is that I'm living in the moment, but also looking at it with fresh eyes every time. And so nature's a huge inspiration for me. Having conversations as well, I think, like this with other creators in the community, has you look at, the same situation again, that maybe problems that you've been experiencing maybe several times, and you talk to someone about it and you realize, wow, here's something I missed. And suddenly you've shifted and there's a whole new way of implementation that you hadn't even thought of before. And that to me just sparks a whole bunch of new opportunities. So yeah, that's kind of
may I ask, where did you get the inspiration for Dollface?
Wow, that's so funny. That's our arcade.
You got lots of wonderful nature, and then you have doll faces.
Okay, so that's more strategic, definitely. And that was one of the first. Actually, that was probably the first effect that went viral. That really changed how I looked at this whole filter making game. And that was because I remember specifically on the Friday, James Charles, the makeup artist in the States, had posted a Bratz challenge. And I was like, okay, this actually speaks to how quickly you can produce, right? Wow. So I recognized that there was this Bratz challenge. And I thought, wow, he literally launched that morning. I quickly drew the illustration. I dumped it into an effect, published it. It was live the next day. So while the momentum of that hashtag was trending, I happened to get swooped up in that. And then I remember opening my phone the next day, and I have never in my life seen so many notifications. And I was just kind of thinking, what just happened here? And that was the inspiration. It was literally just kind of taking a hashtag that I had a good sense would be trending, jumping on it, and then riding it. And so yeah, it was kind of an experiment. Worked out well.
Being reactive is amazing, especially if you can kind of take that sort of inspiration and run with it. I think
for sure.
That if you're building a platform and you can really use Instagram to promote yourself as a creator, but then also kind of jump on some trends. I mean, it's a great way to kind of gain awareness and engagement with the community.
Yeah, like myself when Liverpool won the Champions League, and I had my Liverpool effect ready to go, and it just bombed. So no one used it. I thought everyone in football and soccer is going to use this effect, and it just nobody. And I had all the hashtags, Champions League winners. Sometimes it doesn't work like that, does it?
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, that's probably why. It's only like us Scousers, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think you know what it is. It's hard to try and predict how the algorithm is going to pick up, or even how things go viral. If we had that equation, we'd all, we'd be sitting in different places. But the idea, I think, is to try different things like that, right? Try the hashtag game. I think, utilizing different influencers, timing is always something as well, right? So this is the whole game. And if you're invested in it, then you're going to try these different strategies and see what works, what takes, and see if you can replicate it too, right? So.
And you mentioned, I love that the kind of your creative time is in the evening. So I've found that as well. It's like, it's weird. I think the whole day is like you're reading and there's a buildup of just your brain kind of being a sponge. And then it seems that all my amazing ideas come in the evening. It's like, I need to try and go to sleep now. So with that, do you have, I mean, there's kind of that 4-hour work day and the kind of the golden hours of working. I mean, do you have any other kind of life hacks in terms of creative processes that you'd recommend to creators?
Well, I think for sure for me, what works is always keeping, I keep a sketchbook. That's still my go-to, because I feel there's a different flow in terms of ideas. Again, it's just because that's how I started. So I started as an illustrator, and things that I can't really try and conceptualize in my head, if I were to sit down and just kind of think about it, it wouldn't ever come to fruition the way that it would if I were to sit down with pen and paper. So I always have, I actually have a ton of little sketchbooks, and they go into different purses. They're in different places around the house. They're beside my bed. So for me, if I have an idea and I just need to quickly jot it down, that's what I do. And so those are little building blocks that I'll take then and either put it into, I do draw on the iPad. So if, for example, I know that I'm going to be somewhere a bit more stationary for a bit longer, that I'd be able to build more on a concept, then I'll take my iPad and then I'll take that around. That's been a huge game changer for me, is having that iPad. And specifically Procreate, that's a tool that I use that really helped me to emulate what I was doing traditionally in the chalks and pencils and ink that, I mean, Photoshop did, and I have a lovely Wacom back there that was great for many, many years, but not portable. And so having the ability to take that iPad with those tools and able to keep up with the work that I was doing, again, was a game changer, because you're not limited to the desk, you know, and that's huge. If you're out and, you know, there's a different kind of inspiration when you're sitting, you know, in the backyard and you've got birds and the sun shining and sounds, you know, there's just all these different inputs that you don't have when you're in a little bubble inside the office. So maybe that's another thing we can speak to for inspiration, is get outside and get out of your environment and change it up. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, that's where technology is definitely an enabler. And I think, yeah, if you can go to the park and be inspired by a tree and create something amazing, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
In terms of like looking ahead and the future, what are you super excited or curious about?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit with VR. AR specifically, what I'm excited about with AR is just the amount of information that we're going to be able to translate through that medium. Again, because I'm coming from a place where we've gone through the full range of just this really static 2-dimensional piece of information that is concrete and it's not changeable. And again, it's fed to you. I love that AR presents all this opportunity for storytelling, I guess, really, because you're bringing something to the experience, and suddenly there's a whole bunch of information, and it's not dictated to you. And I love that you're co-creating with the user, right? So I think when I'm building experiences, what I love is changing the way I'm thinking and saying, okay, this is not a finished piece that I'm publishing, right? I am leaving it open-ended. I'm going to come so far along with my creation, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, the user, and you finish the piece. So that whole concept of co-creation for me, on so many levels, because it's not just like, I'm building this and it's me and this is how I'm going to present it to the world. But the fact that you're co-creating, not just with one person, but like there's a whole global world of people. And I think going through this experience of even the early days of creating for AR, seeing how people were using the experiences, for me, were mind-blowing and eye-opening, and in ways that we would never predict that they had used it. And there's a certain connection too that you start, and a rapport you're building with your audience that has never been there before. And I'm all one for connection. That's kind of my foundation. That's where my happiness comes from. And to think that my work now will be connected with people, and not just, you know, in my locale, but around the world, is, you know, that's very fulfilling for me. So
I think
yeah.
Co-creation is a big thing for me in AR and VR, because I think even though we've got this amazing immersive technology going on, we do spend a lot of time watching AR and VR on 2D screens. Like, I watch people using VR on a 2D screen. What I want to do is get in there with them, and that's where for me the next step is. And there's a lot of barriers at the minute to do that, but for me it's always got to come back to immersive. Has got to be experienced and not kind of watched later down the line. It doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, exactly what you're saying. And I think recently we were talking about that, even just getting into Gravity Sketch or Tilt Brush. Imagine the experience, you know, and being able to brainstorm in real time. And then suddenly, not only are you building an experience that will be, you know, something that someone else will be able to finish, but that you with other creators have built in real time, you know, in 3-dimensional space is just, you know,
Do you find it
ever
important to have,
believed that this would happen.
do you find it's important to have like a USP, or you know, I guess, you know, inherently your creative style is unique, or, but in terms of like the AR creator network, is it important to stand out? Are there copycats? How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an ongoing problem, but that's also, you know, historical. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
I think that I do respect that people, especially those that are learning, are going to look to creations that are already there. And I think as part, I mean, even for me, when I started off, I reproduced Michelangelo. That was my thing. Caravaggio, Michelangelo, I have oil paintings, and that was how I learned the process. But then what you do is you take from that and then you figure out how you make it your own. And I think if anything that I would want to do, being more of a, you know, someone who's been in this industry for a while, is continue to encourage those that are coming into this, not to stop at the imitation point, but then to take what you've learned through that imitation and add what it is. Think about your life experience, think about your skill set, think about the things that are meaningful to you, and maybe even the things that you want to change in the world, and add all of those things into what you've learned, and then build something new. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's a great answer. Yeah, I mean, my next question was gonna be about what advice would you have creators for starting out, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. So
Yeah. Well, another thing I would say too to that, especially not so much those that are aware of the potential of AR, but again, going back one step further, there's a whole generation of people that are incredibly creative and have so much to contribute, but have this belief that they can't do it. Like, that was my first stopping block. And I'm really stubborn. And if I want to do something, I will investigate how to get there. However, there are a lot of people that are just like, I don't know how to do it, I'm not going to do it. But I just feel that that's kind of untapped potential. So to those people that are just starting out, don't be afraid to try. Click around. If it doesn't work, you restart. You know, like, that's the beauty of working with tech. It is nothing that's concrete. Like, you haven't invested in bronze, you know, back in traditionally, you haven't put a whole lot of money into what it is. You can just restart and try something again. And I had a conversation last week about failing fast. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that you start something and you figure out, okay, maybe this is not what I want to do. Fail quickly, get on to the next thing. So yeah, that's my definite words of advice for those that are starting out.
awesome. That's awesome, Lianne. Well, thank you so much. Lastly, where can people find you? What's your social handle or website?
So I am on all socials, Lianne Tokey. And if you're looking to pair with me more on a professional, if you're looking just for commercial and brand opportunities, my company is motionography.com.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and some amazing kind of tips and insight. I think this will resonate really well with the community. So thank you.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate you having me. Good to see you. Take care. Thank you.